This is OnEducation Now. I'm your host, Mike Washburn. Ontario education is in upheaval due to government cuts across the board. We asked Ontario's opposition education critic, Marit Stiles, to join us and help us make sense of it all. Have a listen. All right, everyone, we're thrilled to be joined on the podcast by Marit Stiles. Marit is the member of Provincial Parliament for Davenport and education critic for Ontario's official opposition. Before being an MPP, Marit was the National Director of Public Policy and Research for the Alliance of Canadian Cinema, Television and Radio Artists, and she was a trustee for the Toronto District School Board. Welcome to the podcast, Marit.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So before we get started, I just have to say we planned to do this about a week ago, but had some challenges coming together. So I had all these questions pretty much ready to go. And since that time, so much more has happened. I'm having a hard time balancing the need to respect our time. I mean, we're doing this on Good Friday. Happy Easter, by the way. Yeah. And respecting our time and addressing what the hell's going on around here. So I appreciate you coming on, and we got a lot to get to.
Absolutely. And it's amazing how quickly everything is changing, and it is almost impossible to keep up, but we've been doing our best. So both the Premier and the Minister of Education have said that in this new round of cuts and class size increases that, and I quote, not one single teacher will lose their job. Yet we've seen a flood of surplus notices and Twitter inundated with teachers saying they've been laid off. Is the government being truthful with us? I would say no. I think that they are, there's a little bit of wordplay going on here too, right? Sure. I mean, some of this is wordplay, and I think it's a bit complicated, but yeah, for sure. People are getting their redundancy or surplus notices. And by our count, just of the folks who've received them in the last 2 weeks, we're up to probably about 2,000 teachers. And that's not even all the education workers, I think. We're going to probably see more. But and that's certainly not all the school boards reporting it. That's just a small number. Right. So what's really awful, and I'm sure you're hearing this as well, is I'm getting calls from teachers who are saying, they're getting these notices at school during the day and then having to go back to class. And the kids, unbelievable. Yeah, and the kids are seeing that, and it's really hard to, hold it together. And of course, as we also know, these are teachers who often have spent years trying to get the full-time gig, right? And now they've got the full-time position. They worked for years to get to this place. And what's not known is whether there will be any job that they can bump into. And it's looking like there won't be. So the government it's kind of creative wordplay here, because at this stage, the government hasn't released what we call the grants for student needs, which is what's going to actually give the boards the kind of final information they need to finalize their staffing plans for next year. So I think one of the biggest tragedies of these surplus notices is that almost all of them are being handed out to young, energetic, enthusiastic teachers. Like you said, folks who have been on LTOs for a couple of years, just got out of their BEds and have grinded pretty hard, to be honest, on OT lists and LTO lists, and are just getting their first year's contract, their first 1.0, and they're ready to get into the classroom and work hard and make a difference. And it's these ones that are being affected the most. Yeah, that is absolutely true. And without fail, everybody I've spoken to, all the teachers that I've spoken to who receive notices will tell you that they spent years, like you said, on the OT list. They then ended up, and they're also folks who are doing, as we know, because a lot of teachers do, constantly upgrading their qualifications, investing their own money in additional qualifications courses in the summer. And now to have this happen, it's a real problem. And I think there's also something more to that, which is, we know the government's talking about trying to negotiate out or do away with the regulation that basically allows for seniority to play in hiring. And I mean, this is a touchy issue, of course, because many of us also support seniority, right? We believe that you put your hours and your time in, and you need that security. But I think what's happening here is the government's going to use that as a way of kind of blaming unions, frankly, for the loss of younger, or not necessarily younger, but newer teachers. and kind of try to divide everyone again. And I think that is, will be something that I think newer teachers, parents, and everyone else is going to be very divided over.
It's amazing. The newest news to come out is these massive cuts to Ontario libraries. We've already started to see fallout from this. I believe actually just before we came on, Barrie's library, I live in Barrie, just put out a notice on Facebook that the interloan service for libraries in Southern Ontario, they're shutting it down. Like, it's done as of now. So no loaning between libraries. You can't exchange books. It's gone. I suspect that this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I'm really concerned about how this is going to affect rural areas and in Northern Ontario, where libraries are a hub, a backbone of the community.
Absolutely. And, I think also, let's face it, libraries, although I think our library system in Ontario is excellent, and many, many, many people use it. But it also will disproportionately affect more vulnerable people, right?
Of course it will.
Folks who can't afford to go out and buy a book or order a book online or whatever. And so
have internet access or computer access.
Or have internet, absolutely. And so, as you said, libraries are more than just a place you go to take out a book these days. They are a hub. They're in rural communities and also in a lot of our big cities. So it is going to, but it's absolutely going to hit those smaller communities, rural Ontario, in a big way. And let's be clear, this is also a way for the provincial government to download responsibility back onto municipalities. And so they're talking about a lot of these things. They're talking about renegotiating, cost sharing arrangements and stuff like this with municipalities. At the end of the day, this is about the provincial government, getting out of the business of supporting libraries or any number of things. We also just saw a massive cut to public health, I think, which is going to be quite devastating, I think. So everything at once is getting piled onto our regions and our municipalities, and they're going to have to make some really tough calls. And I think for young people, for lots of folks who rely on libraries as a hub for their communities, this is going to be a devastating loss.
My wife is a kindergarten teacher in Peel. So naturally, we've been concerned about what's going to happen with full day kindergarten going forward. At one point, we thought there was a chance it was going to get scrapped entirely. And then we heard it might be 2 DECEs and one teacher supervising multiple sections. Frankly, there seems to be a lot of speculation and not much of a plan. What is the current status of kindergarten in your mind, and what do you think the future holds for kindergarten teachers? Do we have any idea of what the government is planning for this?
Well, we know that the government has said pretty explicitly that full day kindergarten is safe next year. And that's kind of the caveat, right? So they've said that full day kindergarten is safe for next year, but they haven't actually said that the staffing model is safe. And so I think that is something that we could see coming out in the GSNs, in the grants for student needs, that could be affected. And certainly I've heard the same things, that they could be moving to a different model where they have 2 DECEs, early childhood educators, in the classroom, as opposed to a teacher and an early childhood educator. And again, there's I think that the current model is the best model. I think it's a good model. I think the class sizes should be smaller. There's a lot we could be doing better, but at the end of the day, if they go back to this model of 2 ECs, say, and a teacher supervisor, that's again going to divide people, right? Because there are some childcare activists who think that model might actually be better for kids. A lot of education experts who don't, and I think again, like, this is about the government picking and choosing where it can have its battles. They were absolutely talking to. In their surveys and their so-called town halls, they were asking people explicitly about full day kindergarten and whether or not class sizes should get bigger at the primary levels. And I actually think that was just a strategy that they had to get people really upset about that. So then they would turn around and they would make the cuts at the secondary level. And that's what we've seen happen.
So part of recently announced changes includes a proposed mandate that students take 4 e-learning credits over their secondary career. We spend a lot of time on the podcast, Glenn and I, talking about equity. We talk about equity a lot, and I can't think of a better case for equity concerns than this. We know that in particular, taking online courses is going to be a major challenge in rural Ontario and absolutely a challenge for low income households. We kind of just addressed this when we talked about libraries even. These households may not even be able to afford internet access. Do you think Doug Ford and Lisa Thompson understand that Ontario is quite a bit bigger than the Toronto suburbs that they actually try to cater to?
Yeah, no, I don't know what they're doing here, and I actually have to say it's kind of mind-boggling because there is no research out there.
Right.
We've looked really hard. There's no research out there that says that mandatory online learning is the right direction to go. And there's, in fact, tons of research that shows all the things that you've already talked about, which are, that this is that online learning tends to work for kids who are already kind of succeeding, have fewer barriers to success. And so it is an equity issue. I actually sat down with the deputy minister of education in the province when this announcement first came out, and with a bunch of the assistant deputy ministers, and said to them, can you show us any research that shows that this is, that recommends this approach? And they had nothing. They had nothing. And I suspect they didn't even know it was coming. So this to me is all about cutting costs, right? Cutting corners. This is about fewer teachers in classrooms. It's about saving money. And I think they think that they can convince people that this is some kind of new, cutting edge approach to education. Yeah. But, we all know that broadband access is a major issue. Technology in our classrooms, many of our classrooms won't even be able to manage, having a full class of kids online, even if it was done in a classroom. Yep. And of course, as you've said, there's plenty of research out there to show that actually this leads to very inequitable results. We know, just looking at the success rates in a couple of school boards, like in the TDSB, where broadband access, for example, isn't as much of an issue in the city, but we've seen that the dropout rates for students in those classes is very, very high. So I actually think what we're going to see generally with reduction in the number of teachers and adults in classrooms, mandatory online learning, I think we're going to see graduation rates fall, which is a real tragedy because it's taken years to build it up here.
So, teachers are incredibly resilient, incredibly resilient. Yes. Circumstances across the province are all over the map, yet regardless, teachers show up and try to do the best they can with what they have every day. They put students first. With that being said, I think for me, the most troubling aspect of this time we're going through right now is the rhetoric coming from our own government against teachers and now students as well. Our government, the premier and the education minister, are using their bully pulpit to go after students who protest. They call them pawns. They've gone after schools lying about posting union propaganda in the classrooms, and they threaten teachers who may go on strike. What do you think it says about a government that goes this far attacking teachers and students in this way?
Yeah, I think this government has decided that they can appeal to that their path to making the cuts that they decided are important, which, by the way, they're not cutting every area. They're giving big tax cuts to very wealthy people and big corporations. They've got money for that. But they've decided that the path to cutting education is division. It's the politics of division. And that's why they're out there, talking about union thugs and teachers being union thugs and threatening unions who are may be forced to walk out because, of course, we know that big negotiations are coming. And they thought they could divide students from teachers, and they thought they could divide parents from teachers. But I think, if I may just say one very hopeful thing, is that what I've seen over the last couple of months is that parents, teachers, students are unified, and parents have the backs of teachers in this. I don't think this government has actually thought through what the impact of this was going to be. And I think now we're going to see people more united. But that's absolutely the game they're playing. And, I just also say, one of the big things they're going to do here is they're going to put out their grants for student needs, and they're going to push the decisions onto school boards, which ultimately, school boards can decide to some extent how to use the funds they get, but a lot of it is sweatered. And school boards are actually required by legislation to balance their budgets. So they're threatening school boards by doing a review of school boards at the same time. So they're basically going to say, here's what we're doing. We're just giving the money to the school boards, and it'll be up to school boards to make these decisions. Right. And also try to blame school boards. And I think that's also a really unfair, not that I think that school boards always make the right decisions, but I think that it's a very unfair portrayal of what the role of school boards is in all of this. And so, these guys are basically they're playing the blame game, and they're trying to divide us. And if anything, we've seen in the last few months again, is that we're not so easily divided.
So that being said, what can we do? What can teachers do? What can concerned parents do? What can students do to express where do we go from here, Marit?
Well, one thing I've learned over the last few months, or I guess it's almost a year that this government has been in power now, hard to believe, is that they do back off, right? If we make our voices loud enough. And I think that we will still see cuts. I think that's what their agenda is. They believe in, we should talk, if we can, about what I think that the big picture and the big plan is here. But okay. I think that what we need to do is do what we've been doing. We need to continue to protest. We need to send letters to MPPs, particularly conservative MPPs. We need to get out there and knock on doors in our communities and get people to sign petitions and talk to, the quote, average Ontarian about what this is going to mean for our economy, for the future of our communities, if we are making these kinds of drastic cuts to public education, and how important public education is. And I think that is crucial. It's true. The Minister of Education herself has said, she has teachers in her family. We all know teachers. I'm not a teacher, but I have many friends who are teachers, many neighbors who are teachers. Let's remember, let's get teachers and parents out there together talking about, the amazing work that our teachers do. And let's talk about, how we have to protect public education and why it matters. And so I think, continuing on with this is really important, and reminding people that this is a government that's trying to divide us and that we can't be divided.
Marit Stiles, I really appreciate you joining us and answering all of these questions. This is a tough time for teachers. It's a tough time for students. It's a tough time for parents. Everyone is a little scared right now. I won't lie. And I appreciate you coming on and being willing to answer my questions and joining us today. Thanks so much.
It's my pleasure. And if I can say too, I have really appreciated all the teachers who've reached out to me by email or on Twitter to share their stories. It's heartbreaking. I feel like I have an enormous responsibility right now in the legislature to keep calling out the government. But you are doing the most important work, I think, in our society. And we thank you for it. And we know this is a really hard time. And we appreciate you.
Marit Stiles, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you.